Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys right here. These are two different examples of the Kansept knives, Convict pocket knife. First off though, in the name of full disclosure, these guys were provided to me by the manufacturer. Kansept reached out to me, said, hey Nick, these are some of our new releases, which ones you'd like to see? And this one jumped out at me because it looks pretty unique, looks pretty interesting. But anyways, I told him as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be gems, might be junk, they still sent it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume these are the very best quality control one of these guys ever, and I also am trying my best not to let this affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. I'll go on ahead and I'll use the pattern welded Damascus one here. For this, first off, here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica. And here it is against the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. And so what we're going to see here is that in terms of sharpened blade length, we're actually pretty much identical to the PM2, even though the overall blade length, as measured, is a little bit shorter. This guy is coming in right around 3.25 inches, around a little less than 9 centimeters, well, maybe 8.5 or so. So, yeah, that's that. It's not a particularly huge knife, but it does have a fair amount of blade in it, which is nice. So there is that. Next thing, who the heck is this? What is a Kansept? Who is this logo in the back here? Well, this is Kansept Knives. Kansept is a relatively newer Chinese knife maker, and Kansept in this case is working with Sheepdog knives. Right over there, you can see the logo here. This is a design by Sheepdog knives that Kansept has brought to market. And right now on the table, we have two different models of this knife. We have one at the top here that is an S35VN steel, and that is $207. And then we have this one down here that is in a Damascus style steel. Talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it is $217. That's 217. Not 270. Very different story. But anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the Kansept Convict here. So first off, on the good side, well, given that it's named the Convict, I can definitely confirm it has a solid lockup. Yeah, anyways, no, in practice, it's fine, and in fact, it's well made. And this has been something that I've been appreciating from Kansept lately. They are doing good work, by and large, and they're kind of firmly slotting themselves in, sort of, towards the upper end of Chinese OEM stuff. They're not competing with, like, Rayot and things like that, but they're definitely sort of upper middle in that world. And they're a step above a lot of them out there, so that's great to see. In terms of production and manufacturing, when the design they're making is good, the end product tends to be very good, and that's definitely something I appreciate, and it's something I acknowledge as a relatively newer company, although given with a lot of industry veterans at the helm, so to speak, it's really good to see that, and it's nice to see another OEM that's sort of moving up towards the higher end. That's great. Next thing, the ergonomics on this knife are actually, they're pretty solid, right? And it's nice because you can get very close up to the blade, but there's also a little bit of blade guard here to make sure you're not going to be slipping around. It works well. This little thumb ramp here is a very nice little detail. That works, and, just generally speaking, it works pretty well in the hand. I got no real complaints with the ergos. Actually, I have one, the tip of this clip here, but even still, that's more of a nitpick than anything. The ergos, they work pretty well. Next thing, this has very nice lock bar access. What we see here is that the designer has scalloped out this area here. So we have a little bit of an extra hole, as well as what feels like, well, maybe there's a little bit of extra prominence on the bottom here, but it is very easy to get in here and unlock the knife. And that's nice. It's a little thing, but it's an important little thing. So that's good. Next thing, I gotta say, I appreciate the Damascus style steel option on this. So this is a pattern welded steel, and I talked to Kansept and asked them about it, and it is Chinese in origin, as you might expect from Chinese company, but it is 9CR18 MOV steel mixed with 440C. Those are the two component steels to this. And you know what? Those are both reasonably solid budget steels, right? I mean, you don't want to pay $1 million for them, but the important thing and the interesting thing is that this is only $10 more than the S35VN model. And in a world where an attractive pattern welded steel tends to add, hundreds rather than tens, you know what, that's kind of nice. And it gives people the experience of actual true Damascus style steel when, they're only paying a little bit more. Mind you, the budget steel chemistry is going to be a part of that, but still. One thing a couple of people might be asking, I mentioned this in the disassembly already. Let me grab a Damascus style steel blade. So this is a much more expensive knife. This is the artisan, not artisan. This is the Alliance Designs Mini Slim Pickens. But one thing that you'll notice often on Damascus blades is that the pattern will persist into the very back of it. And I know that a number of people, the eagle-eyed among you, might look at the spine of this and go, wait, where's the pattern? Is this fake? Is that lasered on? In practice, no, it isn't. It's just very difficult to see. It's very, very thin lines. When you have a grind like this, very, very thin lines will manifest as very, very close together, right? And much bigger lines will manifest as farther apart. And so, in fact, I'm going to see if I can show this to you again using a jeweler's loupe here. But if we look very, very closely at the top of this guy, you see those little tiny striations going on there, which actually make up the Damascus pattern. So it's there and it's there throughout. It's there down in here. It took me some examination, but anyways, so this is a real Damascus, and it is a decent Damascus. It's well done. I see no delamination issues here. If you know what the budget, or if you know what the steels making it up are, and you're fine with that, then by God, it's nice. And I love seeing that at a relatively inexpensive choice. That's why I asked to check one of these guys out to see how that Damascus is looking, right? Next thing, this has a relatively unusual design. The thing that jumped this kind of off the page, I don't know that you can say that, but anyways, one of the things that made this jump off the page for me, there's the English, was just the design. Looking at it, there aren't that many Wharncliffe-style blades out there in the world where it's completely flat along the bottom, or at least pretty damn flat along the bottom, and, you know, it's relatively clean. There's a lot to like about this guy, and that put this on my radar, and handling it, looking at it very closely, I see design elements that show me that somebody, well, namely Sheepdog Knives, he really did love the design and put some time into it. This little thumb ramp here is a little detail, but it's a nice one. I actually don't mind, you know, at some level, disassembly, it's a little frustrating to have 4 screws rather than probably just one could have done, but at the same time, it's not unattractive. It results in something cool, and you get the behind bars motif. I don't know if they're trying for that, but, you know, it's still a thing. So the design on this guy is interesting and pretty well done on the whole, and I like that very much. Then finally, on the good side, the action on these guys, and this is the one I took apart recently, the action is very good. It's very smooth, very reliable open. There's really no concern about this guy not, you know, opening well. It's running on bearings, and it just, yeah, it works great. It has a very nice, very smooth action, and I got to appreciate that. And so, to me, all that is the good. The action is very nice. It's got a pretty unusual design. The Damascus option is pretty nice, given that it's a very small jump up in price. There is very easy lock bar access. The ergonomics are solid. It is pretty well made, and the lockup on it is quite solid, as you would hope from the Convict. On the great side, it is, the blade is 100% what's great here. It is, again, there are 2 different materials. One is the Damascus made of 440C and 9CR13, 9CR18, that is, MOV, and the other is S35VN, which is a perfectly good, you know, daily steel, right? But so the steel is fine, but more importantly, the geometry is good, right? These come down to a relatively thin edge, which is very nice, and it is a nice, long, full, flat grind, meaning that this guy cuts very, very well, right? That is a beautiful thing, and I also like a Wharncliffe-style blade. Wharnie blades, there's a reason that utility knives have Wharncliffe blades, because they're useful. Utility, useful. But, you know, if you've got like a box or something that you're open, it gives you a little tip that you can just kind of dip in and then pull through. That can be a really nice thing. And it is overall a very nice blade shape. I always appreciate when I'm carrying a Wharnie. The only kind of disadvantage is in like food prep, but even still, without a flipper tab, this becomes maybe slightly plausible. But nonetheless, and it is actually a relatively flat Wharncliffe blade. On both of these guys, this is pretty damn close to flat edged. Whereas you will very often get people who are doing a Wharncliffe blade, but it actually kind of slopes off at the very end or something like that. So I like the blade shape, and I like the blade geometry, and I think they've done a good job with the blade steels too. And so, as you would hope from a folding pocket knife, the best part here is the freaking blade. It is a good, solid blade. On the bad side, one thing to remember about the Damascus, which I was just praising, is that this is a less expensive Damascus steel. Right now, to be fair, this is way beyond the flea market Damascus that you see that is absolute unhardenable garbage. This is absolutely a fine for everyday carry sort of thing, but you are mixing 2 reasonable budget steels rather than mixing high-end and mid-range kind of things. So you should expect performance on this that is in line with 9CR18 MOV or 440C, because that's what the cutting edge is made out of, rather than S35VN. If your goal is to cut for a long time, then you might go S35 on this guy. But this is, it's worth remembering that, Damascus is, any kind of pattern welding is improving the pretty, but it's not necessarily improving the performance in the modern era. So it may be counterintuitive, but the less expensive one is going to be a little bit more of a performer if what you require is long-term edge holding and retention. Next thing, I am very, very disappointed that this guy is spelled Convict. Right? I feel like Kansept, K-A-N, should have the Convict, K-A-N, right? Guys, what are you even doing over there? Come on. Next thing, the value on these guys is okay. They're well made, they're interesting, and I do appreciate the fact that you can get into the Dammy, a real Dammy, for a relatively low upgrade there. But at the same time, 210 isn't super aggressive in terms of pricing. They're well done. I can't get too bent out of shape, but at the same time, there's a lot available in that kind of price tag, and I'd like to see them pushing the value a little bit harder on these models and otherwise. Next thing, the lock bar relief on this guy is external. This is definitely a nitpick, by the way, but I do want to be clear. This is a very clean knife, looking at it from the front, especially this version. And then on the back, you have the random lock bar insert. I feel like this would be much more interesting with an internal lock bar insert, which I don't happen to have a knife with that on the table at the moment, but nonetheless, where basically this part is on the inside rather than the outside. I get why they might not do that, but, they're already contouring one side, but still, design be a little cleaner without. Next thing, this guy is not particularly light. As I said, we're coming in right around 3.25 inches on this guy, and we are coming in right around 4.04 ounces. Not super amazing in terms of weight. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely a little bit heavier than some of the lightweight stuff out there, and you can definitely feel that there's no internal milling. A little bit more problematic is that the balance ends up being a little further back too, right? This guy feels like it balances right in kind of this region here, and, when you're holding it, it feels a little tiny bit back weighted. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit of pocketing on the inside of these liners, scales that is, just to make it a little bit lighter. Not the end of the world, but it's a thing. Next thing, this is pointedly not ambidextrous. Not only is the clip one-sided and the lock bar one-sided, but the opening mechanism, which could very easily have been a two-sided sort of affair, right? You could have just as easily had one of these guys on the, you would have had to have a screw in there somehow, but anyways, you could add the bar on the backside too to make this a little bit more lefty-friendly as well as flick-friendly, but they didn't. That's going to be a little bit frustrating. Well, it's going to be a lot frustrating for 10% of my viewers, but it's going to be a little bit frustrating, I think, for a lot of folks who like that flick. I keep picking this up and wanting to go for it, and it just doesn't work. Then finally on the bad side, and again, this is a relatively nitpicky thing, but the clip on this guy comes up to a point, and it just kind of keeps sticking out there, and that is kind of the one ergonomic loss on this guy. I definitely tends to prefer when you get a knife where the very tip of it, like on the Rat 2 here, is flattened off at the end. That tends to just make it a little bit kinder to your hand here. So a little bit of an extra bend downward, I think would have done this a lot of good ergonomically speaking. That is the biggest ergonomic failing, and it isn't a bad thing. I'm sorry. It isn't a, like, oh my God, it's not like grabbing a condom full of pottery shards here, but at the same time, that's one area where they could make an improvement. So to me, all that is the bad is that the clip could be flattened off at the tip. This is pointedly not ambi with nothing on the other side for you. The balance is a little further back. It's a not particularly lightweight knife. The external lock bar relief makes a pretty clean design look a little dirtier. The value is okay. They misspelled Convict, and this is a less expensive Damascus steel. You just have to keep that in mind. On the ugly front, there is one ugly thing here, and to me, that is this opening bar right here. I just don't get it. I'm going to be honest with you. There are many mechanisms that you can use to open up a knife, right? You can have, holes in the blade like this. You can have a classical thumb stud like this. You can have flipper tabs. You can have all sorts of different things. But this bar, even the thumb disc sort of thing, where they have like a round disc. I don't have any thumb disc knives, but you have a round disc and you just place it on top of the spine. And that has the advantage of being ambidextrous. This opening bar is... Really, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it is like I said, sorry lefties, and no doing on the other side there. Unlike a thumb disc, which at the very least is ambidextrous, you are only really engaging with this very bottom portion of it. So it acts effectively like a thumb stud. But at the same time, it is very seriously in the cutting path, right? The bottom, 3/4 of an inch or so of this blade, you cannot slice clean through something. It will hang up on this guy out here, and that's a problem with the thumb discs as well, which I also dislike. But this this is just like, I don't get it. I kind of wonder whether this is a kind of a hack because the thumb stud would have had to have been down here anyways. But at the same time, it is the most frustrating element of this. Maybe at some level, maybe it's a metaphor, right? Because you got a random bar here, and bars are what tend to cause convicts a lot of pain, right? I don't freaking know. But either way, the opening bar just doesn't do it for me here. I feel like this knife would be strictly better with a thumb stud mounted a little bit further up the blade, or even just a thumb stud, or make it ambidextrous. Do it on the other side. That would be better too. But this just feels like you tried, but I don't think that was a win for me. So to me, that is ugly, and I think that's something they could revise in a future version. Final conclusion, though, this is an interesting design, right? It's bringing together a good construction, solid ergos, easy lock bar access, a nice and reasonably priced Damascus option, a relatively unique design, nice action, nice blade, all in a pretty wonderful package, right? I appreciate that. The lock bar relief does break up that clean design a little bit. They could have pressed the value a little harder. It's not particularly lightweight with a kind of a weird balance. It's not ambi, very much not ambi. The clip could use that little extra bend here, and the opening bar is, shall we say, not a feature I hope to see become more popular, but generally speaking, you know what? It's a fine little knife, and it's a design that's off the beaten path. It works well in the pocket, it cuts well. There's really not a whole lot to complain about here aside from the one big thing. And ultimately, final conclusion, this is going to be one of those where you're going to make the call, and either way, you're probably going to be right. You know, for me, this opening bar is kind of a deal breaker. It's something I'd love to see swapped out in a future revision. I think it's something that would make the knife just a lot more compelling. If they were to address that, do things a little bit differently, this would be in a very different kind of world. But that is kind of the main drawback. And I know that for some folks, with some cutting tasks, that's really not going to be as important. And if you put that aside, the knife is, generally speaking, both pretty unique and pretty damn well done. So, I guess, final conclusion, if you're a lefty, if you're not loving the bar, or if the design isn't speaking to you, then, you know what, I'd leave this little guy locked up. But if you love the look, you don't mind the bar, and you're happy to pay the price, then I think this little Convict could play a role in your collection. The last thing you should do is bail on this. This Convict could be a breakout hit for you? Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.